Covert hypnosis could be defined as the power to make anyone change with only a few simple hypnotic phrases that will bypass almost magically the conscious mind and the limitations of any client. However, unfortunately, more than 80% of people who are trained every year into some NLP center, training center, or some hypnosis training center don't actually use their skills or don't make it to the professional career where they actually use it on a day-to-day basis to help people. And there are many reasons for that we will unveil during this video. And you are going to discover that covert hypnosis can actually be way simpler than you think it is. And what are the best covert hypnosis techniques you could use as of today to help even the most resistant client you could ever have, or any person who has been traumatized, any person who is in massive need of being helped. What are the main ways you could do that to improve the quality of their life? So let's start with the main limiting beliefs that hypnotherapists of all sorts or NLP coaches suffer from, and those beliefs prevent them from actually using their skills and selling their services as a professional. The first one, my favorite, is I am not certified enough. That's a great one. I used to see people like this when I developed my skills about 10 years ago. I used to see people like that getting into the next certification and the next certification, but never actually feeling ready from the inside. And at some point, those added seminars, trainings they were attending for another $3,000 was not really bringing them anything more than what they already knew. They had an environment for practicing for sure, but it didn't really bring them anything more than what they knew. So the point is, well, as long as you can have people in front of you to practice, you will be ready pretty soon. But many people refrain themselves from doing that because they don't feel competent enough. And that is going hand in hand with the next one. I am not knowledgeable or competent enough to help this client. Presupposing there is a type of person you are not qualified enough to help, or that your skills are not enough. And we will go just later on why this is always a limiting belief and an assumption that is never really true, because people, when they come to you, they are ready to change anyway. But many people get themselves trapped into thinking they are not ready. The next one is, if I fail with this client, my career is over or will never start. Let's say many people I saw trying to use some NLP techniques on a practice session. If they don't get the person to change in the next 5.5 minutes, then they think it is not working because it was sold by big advertising stuff. It was sold as a method that can cure any disease in just 5 minutes. So then they put themselves into question, oh, if I didn't make that person change in 5 minutes, then I'm not competent, or some assumptions like that. But failing with a client, let's say you consider that a failure in the end, whatever, it is not even something I would say had threat to who the client was. I would say it had more threat to your own beliefs about what you can do or not do. If it is really something you are completely not qualified, or you feel something really negative around a potential client, you have the right to just say, no, I don't work with you. That is completely okay to just say that on the phone. I think it is highly disrespectful, though, to make people pay to only tell them later, I cannot help you. I think it is kind of a scam if you do that. And somebody tried to do that with me. I said, no fucking way, get out of here, long ago. But if you can have the person on the phone and you can pre-scan the person, that's more than enough. You will know right away if you can't work with somebody, if you get some really negative feeling just being on the phone with somebody. Okay, then tell them, okay, I am not a person to help you, I may know somebody else. And that's okay. But as soon as you have made a decision to be in front of the person you will help, then no. Now we are out of all those worries. Oh, whatever, if it doesn't change. You just shut that down and you are with the person and you find the simplest way to help them, and you will find it anyway. Another one pretty common is I need more techniques. So coming back to the I need more certification, more techniques. So I know hypnosis, but I must know NLP, and I must know EMDR, and I must know this RTT, whatever. It is exactly like in martial arts back in the day when there was those tournaments about does karate can beat judo, or does Muay Thai beat Thai boxing beat taekwondo. The whole point is it's just about how advanced the practitioner is. It's not about which method they are using. A guy who has 20 years of fighting experience, who is doing the least effective martial art, can beat the guy who's doing MMA for just 5 months and never had any fighting experience prior to that. Because it is the experience that builds up your skill set much more than which techniques are you using. I see that so many times with the people who got rejected of their corporate world and now they want to become a coach because they have been rejected. And I can pick those ones whenever I see somebody who's trying to sell you how more effective his method is. Oh, I do EMDR and this is more effective than NLP because this is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, it must be so great. But in the end, they're just trying to validate some fragile ego, wounded. But we don't care about the technique you use. We care about how much experience do you have, and in order to get experience, you need to get in front of real people and finding the simplest way you can have to help them. And we will get to this during this video. And the last one I have already talked about briefly, there are clients I am not qualified to help. Bullshit! You can help anyone as long as you have made a commitment in your mind to go up to the point where you will find a solution anyway. And to finally break all those negative assumptions, let's check this thing. Basically, that is the final reframing of why you are more competent than you think you are. Because as long as one person has been calling you or is in front of you, either through a Zoom conversation or face-to-face, a client and you are the hypnotherapist, basically they have already crossed many thresholds and many lines. In the beginning, most people, like 80% of people on earth, are like closed-minded, they don't want to hear about anything, they are right about everything, you'd have nothing to teach to them. Those people, if you try to help them, you're going to a wall, but the thing is, those people will never really actually ask you for help. So you will not encounter those if you are a hypnotherapist or a coach, or in most cases you won't, or maybe you will meet one or two, but they are like on the path of changing anyway. Then you have people who realized that something was going wrong, the orange square. They have realized that something was going wrong and they are kind of lost, don't really know where to go, or like they have a few ideas but they really feel in pain. Then you have people who have tried the popular methods. So, okay, I have to think positive. Every day in the morning, I have to rehearse affirmations. I am feeling good. I rock. Everybody loves me. I'm gonna crush it this year. Yeah, but those things never really work unless you have done some more deeper work on yourself, deeper inner work on yourself. Basically, people tried superficial methods, they realize it doesn't work, and then only they start being open enough and decreasing their level of assertiveness about I know everything, and that's where they start asking for help. And the people who get to you, if you are a professional coach or whatever, people who get to you, they are there. They have already crossed all those thresholds, which means they are on the point of being almost changed anyway. So yes, some of them may be challenging to work with, but in the end you are more than enough to work with those people because they have already worked on themselves even if they didn't realize it. Just by putting into question all the things they thought they knew and discovered they knew nothing or not as much as they thought they knew, and that they had a problem, and now they had the courage of calling you or calling a professional of help. That means they are ready to change anyway. So many things you say that you would think are like, yeah, but it is not a super advanced Ericksonian metaphor. We don't fucking care. It is just about that person in front of you is ready to change. Say the simplest thing they need and make them change. And another thing that used to get people stuck is that they just have one method and they are super worried of changing to being flexible, adapting. If you start a conversation with a client and the client starts to talk about something else that really to him or her feels much more important, and you're like, oh no, I have to stay on my method. My method says to do a 6-step reframing with an age regression. I have to say, no. The client moves, you move with him or with her. The people move, you move with them, and if they change the topic of the conversation, follow them until they start to get to a confusion where they realize something was not the thing they thought they knew, and that's where you can use embedded commands and positive suggestions. In the beginning, follow them. So it's just because you have learned a method in 5 steps, which makes it easier to learn it if you have clear steps in your mind. But then when you are in front of the client, just randomly catch everything they are giving to you. You compose your therapy session with what they are giving to you. And with that outcome in mind of I'm going to be flexible, the criteria in mind, you are going to decrease the level of fear because you will accept uncertainty. You will accept that even if the session doesn't go as you have imagined, that is okay. It means that things are going forward because now it means your mind is reevaluating things. If your mind is reevaluating things, it means you have listened properly to the problem of your client and you realized they needed something else from you. So the point where you might be feeling stuck or confused about, oh shit, they said this, I don't know what to say next. The point is that is a good signal. It means your mind is reinterpreting things based on what you have been seeing and hearing and feeling from the client in front of you. And that is our next big point. It is that hypnotherapists usually are paralyzed by resistance. They are so scared about what if the client resists, what if the client doesn't change, or what if I do the metaphor and nothing happens and they ask for their money back or whatever. You need, I would say, to evaluate what is your current mental strategy or mental procedure. You have an unconscious procedure that you are using during your sessions, whether you know it or not. You follow a certain type of procedure. Mine is usually broadly, it is okay, what are the problems, what are the main symptoms and causes of the problems, then what is the outcome. Just there people are already lost sometimes because they are like, I don't know what I want, I just want to not feel bad, but then they don't know what will they do once they don't feel bad anymore. So problems, outcomes, resources, what do you have available in your life, people, mental strength, whatever that can help you, and blockages, the limiting beliefs, the trauma, whatever. That is my basic structure, okay? Phase 1, 2, 3, 4. Then obviously, in a session, I'm going to move. I'm going to adapt. Maybe I'm going to go right away toward blockages, and then I'm going to go back to outcomes, then I'm going to go to resources, then back to blockages because I felt something was really not right about this. But when you have your clear structure like this, it feels more comfortable to enter a therapy session because you at least have something to rely upon. And from that base, then of course you can adapt, but you have a base in mind. And for some people who might think, I just wing it right away, I don't know what I say, of course you have a structure in mind, it is just that it may not be conscious yet. One example could be you are greeting the client whenever you start a session, then you are asking them how life is going, then you are mentioning some points once they start talking that they could work on, and then you look anxiously at your binder, at your notes because you don't know anymore what you should say because they have been resistant one time. And then you start the procedure hoping something will work, so you start the induction, the hypnotic induction or something like that, but you're like still worrying, I hope it's going to be good. And that is, I'm not even pulling that out of my hat, it is really something that many therapists have in their head, whether they are conscious of it or not. They induce a lot of paralysis, a lot of anxiety into their thinking process because they are injecting into their thoughts all the what if. What if it doesn't work? What if the person doesn't like what I say? What if the person wants to get the money back? If you are paralyzed by all those things, it will naturally cause more resistance and more disconnection between the person, the client, and yourself. So, of course, it is normal if you don't have 10 years of experience to be a bit anxious. That's completely normal. But the point is, clarify what is happening in your head when you are in front of a client. Because if it is not clear in your head, it certainly won't be clear for the person in front of you either, because when they come to you, they are usually lost and confused about their life. So it is not to them to tell you how to make your session happen. But basically clarify what is your mental procedure, conscious or unconscious, and figure out, for the sake of this, figure out where you could improve your model, your unconscious model for how to conduct a hypnotherapy session. Where in your mental strategy could you improve that? And notice what are the main triggers, the main signs or signals or behaviors that tend to make you feel paralyzed or confused or anxious when the person starts raising their voice, for example, which can happen in a therapy session because when you're unveiling deep emotions, some people, of course, will have some anger popping up and they may transfer that anger on you, that is completely normal. But if you're paralyzed by this, okay, now you have an area of work to work on. You know what to work on. If you are paralyzed by silence, when the person is so insecure that they don't communicate anything, barely a few words, and you feel like you think because they don't say much, it means you're not competent. Of course not, but clarify that for yourself. What are your main triggers? Because now we are going to be able to work on that specifically by getting into a more successful hypnotist state. Basically, I'm sure you can think of Bandler, you can think of Tony Robbins, you can think of those big names like that. Somebody that you have seen using hypnotherapy techniques who is really great at it. Somebody who is a master at those. And you could imagine for yourself, how would you feel if you were that person that you know of, that you have seen practicing? How would you feel like inside yourself if you were that person? Obviously, you're not that person, you don't have their experience yet, but you could imagine, how do they feel like? Do they feel more relaxed? Do they feel more creative? Do they look differently at the person? Just elaborate for a few minutes. How would you feel if you were them? And once you have this representation in your mind, what you could do is imagine how they would respond to those triggers. The things that used to make you paralyzed, to get you completely very anxious because you don't know what to say anymore. If that very successful hypnotist, if Tony Robbins was you at your place with this person, with that exact client who is being resistant, how would he handle that? Basically, he or she, if you have another model, how would the greatest therapist you know of handle this situation? How would they respond? And then how can you encore somehow those sensations and possibilities? If there was like a magical way you could encore for yourself, maybe with their voice in your head, maybe with the way you touch your fingers, whatever you could do, or just firing an image of them as you talk to the person and noticing how you can respond now that you are like Tony Robbins or whatever. With your mirror neurons, basically you are going to reinterpret your way of talking and what the behavior meant. The thing you thought was, oh, the client is stubborn and stuck-minded. How would you respond if you were Tony Robbins? You can have an encore of that you will then associate, coming back to your mental strategy during a session, you can associate that encore with the specific trigger that used to make you feel stuck and paralyzed in front of the client. Now attach that encore, and you can do that through encore collapsing, whatever you want. You can attach that encore to that negative trigger that used to get you stuck. Now we are going to get to the actual method, the things you can say, the hypnotic phrases you can use whenever you have somebody you want to make change. Basically, I would say there are three main concepts to understand, to improvise, to better elaborate with your suggestions, with the way you help the person change whenever you have understood what the problem was. Okay, how can you make that person who is suffering from an anxiety disorder or whatever, get that person to a state where they feel comfortable in their life, they feel happy and joyful, and they build the family they wanted, whatever is the outcome of your client. There are mainly three big principles. The first one is time frame, the second one is perceptual position, and the resources available. So one by one, time frame is in many of those language patterns we are going to see later. The time frame means shifting the perception of where they are. One big technique that everyone knows of coming from that principle is age regression, coming back in the past, what you have lived, whatever trauma you have lived in your past, what happened when you were 8 years old and your Uncle Todd tried to play with your Winnie, whatever happened, just basically going back in the past and figuring out what the hell happened that made that person get to this fucked up state where they feel like nothing will ever change in their life. So the time frame in terms of the past, time frame in terms of the future, what will happen after you have changed, and that is a great one if you can't figure out what is the outcome of your client, or if your client himself or herself can't figure out what would be a good outcome for them. Then you can ask them, what will happen after you have changed? Robert, whatever. You can figure out what will happen in your life after you have changed, because I'm pretty sure some things will be there that are not there right now. What are they? For the sake of my understanding, could you tell me what will happen once you have changed this anxiety disorder, this trauma, whatever it is? What will happen then? Or time frame in terms of it's only you could suggest it's only a matter of time before, this is one is a specific language pattern, it's only a matter of time before your unconscious mind finds new solutions. That was one of the big ones of Milton Erickson, popping unconscious mind in every sentence whenever people are resistant, because when you say unconscious mind, you are presupposing that something will happen below their awareness, which is much more difficult to resist because it is on purpose below your awareness, or something you don't know about. So whenever he was saying, and sometimes maybe your unconscious mind will find a way to deal with this relationship, don't you think it could happen? Whatever he could say, unconscious mind is a big one, but so only a matter of time before your unconscious mind. It is again playing with the time frame, presupposing something will happen in the future that will be relevant. So time frames, you can play with that, the past or the future, what happens simultaneously. Time frames are a big principle behind literally almost every hypnotic technique you can imagine. Time frames are a really big one. The second one is perceptual positions. So this is what I did with you right here with either Milton Erickson or Tony Robbins. So if you were Tony Robbins, and playing with those perceptions is a massive help. Either perceptual positions in terms of, okay, somebody who is successful or somebody who does not have your problem, what would they do here? So same thing with if Tony Robbins was you, whenever you are in front of a resistant client, what would Tony Robbins do? The same way you can ask to your clients, if you were somebody who never had this problem in your life, how would you handle that? And from there, they are going to give you an answer, a resource that you can build from to make them take better decisions and improve the quality of their life. You can also make them shift through the perceptions of people around them. If they are in some family conflict, it is a big one. In a family conflict, you can make their mind shift through the perception of their dad, their mom, their brothers and sisters, their cousin, the grandpa, whoever they are in conflict with, by getting them down in a trance and making them get inside the head of somebody they are in conflict with, first to dissociate, notice what they see from the outside, and then make their mind jump inside, mentally, jump inside the perception of somebody they are in conflict with. Usually that unlocks barriers, that unlocks trauma, difficult sensations. It helps to make them shift their perception in that sense, or the perception of who they were and who they will be. When you get, in the new version of yourself, Robert, when you will be in the next version of yourself, what would you like to tell to the old version of yourself? Being right now, actually. But if you go into the future and imagining what you would say from the perspective of somebody, of a version of you who is more advanced, what would you tell to the you of today? Which is therefore a mix with time frames, the future. But those principles are really what you find in most language patterns. And so the third one was resources available. So this is the basic NLP protocol. Just what do they have available? The triangle of resources. So basically, where do they have in their life a resource of confidence, of motivation, of willpower? What in their life are they doing well? And even if they tell you, I'm depressed, I'm a piece of shit, nothing ever works, yes, but there is still something that they are doing well that they probably don't give themselves credit for. And when you can find this, then you can encode the resource eventually, or you can make them associate more with that part of them that is much more capable of acting upon difficult things and finding solutions, and using that to solve their current problems. So, as a recap of this, time frames, perceptual positions, and the resources available. What do they have already available in their life that can help them? So now let's see 7 different language patterns and seeing how those 3 big principles apply to all of them in one way or another. The first one that you could say in a kind of every session is in a world where everything is possible. So this is changing the perceptual position because it is getting them in another mental context, a mental context where they don't have limitations. Obviously, you would say that only once you have enough rapport for the person to mentally act upon the things you are talking about. So maybe not use that right away in the beginning of the session. But so in a world where everything is possible, what would you be the most compelled by? Another version of that is if there was no limitations, if there was no limits, what would your mind naturally drift toward as of today, as of right now? The main thing you are not allowing yourself to think about, to act upon, to do because of whatever outside consequences you perceive or internal restraints you perceive. If there was none of that, if there was no limits, what would you do? And how would you handle your problem? So this is the perceptual position, shifting the context in which the client's mind think something is stuck. Then second one, if this problem was coming from a part of you. Perceptual positions again, if this problem was only coming from a part of you, you are helping the client to dissociate from their negative behavior. Any kind of negative behaviors like I drink too much, or any kind of past negative memory, oh, I failed at this, I am a bad person because I didn't help my little brother or whatever. Whenever somebody is stuck on that, if you can make them dissociate between their identity, they are an entire person, and only a part of their identity has been portraying those bad behaviors or those failures or those whatever negative consequences. If it was only a part of you, then what would you say to that part of you, for example? How could you be more compassionate toward that part of you? Or if that part of you was leaving you forever, how would you feel then? You can play with that representation of helping them dissociate from their problem. Then we have the if you could change this by tomorrow. So this one, as you have probably understood, is referring to time frames, the future, tomorrow. But it is bringing back, first of all, a solution, because many people who get into a session, they think there is no way they can help themselves. So if you can tell them, first of all, by tomorrow is a massively reduced time frame to handle a big problem, presupposing it was something big for the client. So if you could change this by tomorrow, what would happen next? Or if you could change this by tomorrow, how would you do it? If you could change this by tomorrow, who would be the first person you would like to talk about that with? And with that, you can help the person build a better outcome in mind, a better representation of where do they want to get. As I said before, many people, when they enter a session, they know what they don't want anymore, but they have no idea of what they want, or they have a brief overview of, yeah, I want to feel good, but then they don't have any sort of clarity about what will happen once they feel good, and feel good how, feel good with whom, feel good in which circumstances, about what, in which way, you know. they don't have really an idea of that. And when the outcome is not clear, basic Tony Robbins stuff, when the outcome is not clear, obviously you're not going anywhere. So if this could change by tomorrow, Robert, what would be the next thing you would like to do once it is solved? Time frames, future consequence, slide of mouth, therefore, somehow. But let's stay simple here. Number 4, who benefits the most from your lack of progress? It is coming back to one of the oldest NLP presuppositions that every bad or negative behavior or event has a positive intention behind it. So if you have fucked up at something, you are a bad person because you didn't do that right. Yes, sure, you are a bad person. Now, I would like to know, for the sake of my understanding, what was the positive benefit some part of you received because of that negative thing you have done or you haven't done correctly? So who benefits the most is the idea here, coming back again to perceptual positions. Who benefits the most? Is it like a part of you that is wounded that benefits the most? Did you do that to try to please somebody? Maybe you had a very abusive parent that really made you try to always reach the next level before everybody else, make you compete now endlessly. And in that case, maybe the negative stress you put on yourself is actually benefiting The attention of the parent that used to treat you badly, that's a big one that keeps coming back in many therapy sessions, for example. So who benefits the most from your lack of progress with this dealing with anxiety problem? It is shifting the perception to, again, a part of them that is not them. It's only a part of them that has a function of keeping them trapped because there is a positive benefit. And once you find that, it is way easier to help the person to change. Next, number 5, what will happen 1 year after you have changed? So this is the time frame again, the future consequence, and 1 year after is usually helping to find even added resources, I would say. You can find the main resource the person will need to overcome their problem, and 1 year from now is a massive time frame, time change, which will make people find even more resources. Because if it has already been 1 year, you have changed your main problem, the main thing you have right now that used to keep you stuck. If you have changed this for 1 entire year already, can you imagine how many more things you have been able to accomplish? You have been maybe more motivated, you have been more grateful, you have been more joyful. Okay, now if you tell me that, I have 3 more resources to work with during the session. I have grateful, motivated, and joyful. So I can work with that and use that in my language. Okay, so if there was a joyful part of you, what would they tell you right now, Robert? I can use your own anchors, the things you have been giving to me, so that I help your mind to unveil the deeper limitations and reframe all the problems once and for all. Number 6, if you had to accomplish this or you would lose what matters most, what would you do? So this one is kind of the triggering one. It is really with people, I would say, who are extremely tough shell, like don't want to let go, tough guy or tough woman sometimes, really nothing is, I'm right, I'm gonna get this, whatever. And you can just ask them, okay, who is somebody who really matters in your life? Very easy. If you have a parent in front of you, the kids are the trigger, like there's really a no-brainer. And therefore, if you had to solve that problem, or your son or your daughter could be gone by tomorrow. I wouldn't use the term dying because it might be kind of too strong, but gone. Gone might just mean, you know, disappear, but not dead, but just disappear. But just if you had to find a way to solve that right now, as of today or as of tomorrow, otherwise your son or your daughter, your kids are gone. Somebody who is a magical magical evil being would steal your kids if you don't handle this right now. Then what would be your response? And that is another perceptual position in terms of context. You put them in a context where they don't have a choice anymore. That is extremely helpful. I wouldn't use that on everybody, obviously. If you have a person who is already like broken, depressed, I wouldn't use something like this. But with somebody who is like really tough, I don't have a problem, people have a problem, not me. With somebody like that, I may use this kind of extremely strong and almost evil reframing just to make them unveil the thing they didn't want to let go of. Because if they are tough, like nothing will ever change, I'm like this, it means they have built a shell of bullshitness, of like nothing will ever change. Using that kind of reframing of context, so shifting the position in a context where they don't have a choice anymore because the thing that matters the most to them will be gone if they don't change, that will be a massive ice breaker, a massive wall breaker. If they had built a wall between you and their emotions, it's going to break the wall immediately. If they are in a session, if you deal with somebody not in a session, that's another story. But we have other methods for this. And last one, how old is your limitation? A last one coming on the time frame, this time the past. How old is your limitation? It is just to clarify when did this start. It is helping the client to clarify when the problem started and what the problem could be connected with in their past. Because if you ask, but it is like a way to bypass the resistance of, oh, I know where you're going, but I don't have any problem in my childhood. Let's talk about the present. Yeah, sure, I agree you don't have any childhood problems. Now, could I just ask you, how old is that limitation? You say you have an anxiety disorder. You say you have too much pressure at work. Can I ask you, this part of you that has too much pressure, How old is that part of you? Because I guess you were not born with massive stress and pressure at work. I don't think you were at work when you were 2 or 3 years old. So how old exactly is that limitation? And with this, you can also bypass maybe some resistance of I don't want to talk about my past, or like my childhood is private. I don't want to talk about that. Sure, we won't talk about it. Can I just ask you, how old is your limitation? That way they will answer it anyway, because you are bypassing the resistance. But basically, those are some examples here of how you could help the person to change indirectly. It is not about forcing them, it is about bypassing, hacking through the main limitation they used to have. And the main point with all those language patterns is to really adapt to your natural way of communicating. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Don't try to be somebody else. You need to understand the main concepts. So time frame, shifting the context or perceptual position, and finding resources available. And once you have understood those, then you can adapt the language patterns to your style of communicating. It doesn't need to be super long and slow voice, hypnotic phrases. You don't need to speak like that, okay? You can speak like Tony Robbins, speak at like a tempo of 350, and it works despite that extremely fast tempo. So there is no rule about how your voice should sound, like on some commands you may want to alter your tempo, whatever, but the natural way you communicate does not need to be altered to the point where you feel completely weird saying something in front of your client. Don't try to be bright or smart, it is not the point. You're not trying to impress other NLP coaches by telling them, hey, I did this with this client, I made him change. You're not here for gratification, you are here to help the person in front of you to find the fastest and clearest and simplest way to overcome their limitation. That is your job, you are being paid for this. So the idea is to spontaneously, the way you conduct a session, to spontaneously say whatever comes to your mind whenever the person is talking about their limitation, their problem. You just use the first language pattern you can think of, and you keep on talking spontaneously until one of the triggers we talked about previously in this video, one of those triggers where you feel the resistance because the person is not going anywhere or looping in circles or like just blocking whatever you wanted to ask them, they are blocking. Okay, whenever a resistance like that is happening and you feel the trigger in yourself for, oh shit, I'm paralyzed again, oh, they're gonna want their money back. When you have those worries coming back, which will happen if you are a beginner, obviously, once you get that coming back, you get back to your encore, the encore of, twitching your fingers to remember back what you felt when you imagined Tony Robbins being you, whatever your encore is. Whenever the trigger happens, you get back to your encore and you notice what is the next phrase that comes to your mind once just after you have used your encore. And that is how you will say the next best thing for the client you have to deal with at hand right now. Use your encore, a positive encore, clarify your structure and use your positive encores whenever you get stuck with the client. That is how you will make the session progress toward a positive end, and that is how your clients will definitely refer you and want to keep working with you. That is all for this video. You have some tutorials in the description if you want to check that, and I wish you good luck and keep practicing your hypnosis techniques and your covert language, and I will see you in the next video.